All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Empowered Expat Wife podcast. I'm so excited to bring this very special episode to you because today we're going to talk about how to create a killer CV despite all of those relocations and the gaps that you may have, so that you can apply for the right positions in your host country or upon your return to your home country and advance in your career. And to discuss this and to take this further, I have a very special guest with me today, Lucy Samuels. Thank you so much for being here. Hello.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
So great and excited. So let me introduce Lucy real quick to the ones of you who don't know her. Lucy helps smart and talented professionals like you communicate confidently so that employers can see you, hear you, and hire you. Very important. She has a background in communication and linguistics and 15 years of corporate experience, mostly spent organizing and scratching out words for corporate lawyers who are some of the wordiest and pickiest people on earth. So she brings a lot of experience to the table. And right, so let me get right into this and get started with the burning question that's probably on a lot of women's minds here, which is, as we briefly discussed previously, the typical dilemma of expat wives is that they had to leave their career behind in order to follow their husbands on their foreign assignment. So many actually even turn into serial expats, meaning that they go from one foreign posting to another and they just relocate several times in a row. So this can make it really difficult to pursue a career and quickly results in gaps on their CV. How would you suggest they can present these gaps to a potential new employer so that it's not used against them?
So that's a great question. I love that you just got right to the point because that is a burning question on a lot of people's minds. The first thing to remember is that nowadays, most people do have some gaps. It's just the world that we live in. And I would say that recruiters and employers are more open to hiring professionals with non-linear careers than in prior generations. People are not always expected to just work the same job until you retire, or move up the company, or just be doing the same thing at the same place. So that said, it is though helpful to sometimes address those gaps on your resume or on your CV, not to the point of dwelling on it, but just kind of adding a line, maybe with an asterisk about an assignment, like using that sort of word where it's not like you purposely just, oh, I just want to quit a job anytime I get ready. Like you make it understood that it was a contract role or that it was an assignment for your spouse. You can do that, not to dwell on it, but just to sort of explain those dates. I would put maybe an asterisk. That's a very practical way of doing it. Another way to present gaps in your work history is to just embrace them. Part of the reason that people are reluctant to hire someone who has moved around a bit is because it's expensive to recruit. It's expensive to onboard someone and then train them and then have to do that whole thing again in another year or another 2 years. So maybe think about remote work. Maybe think about positioning yourself in a global company if you can, if that makes sense for you, where it's okay for you to stay in the company and just relocate. Like lots of companies have that. A lot of consultants are expected to be able to relocate. That might be a little tricky because you're having to coincide with your spouse's relocations, but it's definitely something to consider. Or just look for the kind of work where people are not expecting that long-term commitment from you. Put it out there on the table. Be honest. I'm not saying that you need to tell them every single thing, but be honest about the fact that you are an expat spouse and you do have assignments from time to time, and there are some companies that might want to scoop you up. And even with that, that might be something to think about. Also presenting the fact that you have global experience.
Mhm,
A
mhm.
lot of people are, if the job is for you, it's for you. And so there are some people who will just be wanting to scoop up someone with that kind of experience that someone else doesn't have. So
Yeah.
embrace it, explain it, don't necessarily dwell on it.
Right. And I love what you say about embracing it, because I think a lot of times the way that we present something or the way that we present ourselves and how confident we are in communicating that, that actually, that's really what the employer is looking for. So if he sees you go all, timid and hesitant and are kind of ashamed of that gap, for instance, right? Or that really, I don't know, just like a filler that you have on your CV, just something you did that's not relevant or in any way. But if you can communicate this and just embrace it and underline the good that you got out of it, I think that will actually make much more of an impression on the employer.
I think so. And if you do have some work experience that is not a job per se, it's great to even mention that because again, your skills are important and you could have gained those skills anywhere. It's
Mhm.
not only from working on a 9 to 5 job. I've had people ask me, well, I do this volunteer role. I'm on a board. I've done so much work. I've done fundraising. And they said, but I didn't get paid for it. That's fine. No one is asking for your tax returns. They're only asking that you have the experience, that you have the knowledge, and that you can bring that knowledge to the new employer, not how much you got paid. That's another topic, another conversation. But it's more so how that experience is relevant to this new employer. It doesn't matter where you got it. So if you were in some sort of organization and you did a lot of work, own it. It's yours. It's your experience. Embrace it.
What about
Definitely.
if you had stayed home with to be with your kids for several years? Is that also something where you can just say, "I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to say everything that I've learned." Like in my case, I remember when I went back to my previous job after having my first child, it was multitasking. It was just
Right.
thinking of a million things at the same time. So, do you think this is also something that women nowadays can just use to their benefit and not to their detriment?
It can be. I would also think of it as well, first of all, if you were doing anything that's relevant, like you mentioned, multitasking, I would bring that in. It depends on how long you were out of, not working, not in the workforce. If you were not in the workforce but doing something else that can speak to the value that you would add, I would definitely add that in. I'm not really a big fan of putting like your family household as if it were a job,
Right.
but like I said, a one liner, an asterisk explaining, throughout this time I gained skills in multitasking, prioritizing, managing projects, whatever you may have been doing that can help that new employer. And there's also, so for a resume, we'll have like a summary. You can summarize that and add that in there. And I would always say, not with a but, just speak matter of factly, own it. So not saying I wasn't working, but I did this. No, just I did this. I learned this. I can bring this to your organization. I can manage all of these different things. So that's something that you might want to include in the summary that someone will see even before they get to the body of the resume with all the dates. People who read resumes and CVs, their eyes are trained to go in certain places. They
Mhm.
just know, they kind of look, because most of them have the same structure. A lot of people try to get a little fancy. Keep it simple. I always say keep it simple, sugar. Don't 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 make it too complicated, because people are used to looking at things and being able to see, okay, I'm looking here, here, here. They're just looking at things in the same way. So make sure that they see what they need to see when they look at your CV or look at your resume.
Mhm. Okay, so embrace the gaps and the relocations and the jobs that maybe weren't really jobs that you
Mhm.
may have had, like volunteering and
Right.
that. Ditch all the buts, just communicate confidently what you've gained, focus on the positive experience, the skills that you acquired, and yeah, and just communicate it really confidently. I think that's important.
Absolutely. Confidence is key because, like you said, how you present yourself to someone is what they see. That's all they see. They don't know you yet, right? And they don't even want to get to know you. If you're doubting yourself, then why would they start to have some faith in you? Like, you
Right.
have to do that for yourself first before you can expect someone else to do that for you. That's
Yeah.
really important.
That is really important. And I just want to add here real quick because I hear that sometimes from my clients well, I haven't really done anything in the past 3 years, let's just say. But actually, relocating, moving to a different country, managing life in a different country, a different language, a different culture, while your husband is probably away all day or even traveling a lot, that is doing a whole lot. So
Mhm.
I think it starts that you give yourself the props that you deserve and realize that you have been doing a lot of things. They may not be those eye catchers on a CV, but if you twist it a little bit, you can actually make it
Mhm.
sound really attractive to an employer. And
I think so.
there are people like Lucy that can help you do that also.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. I agree with you 100%. So we have two things that we don't, that I like to say, butt out, meaning no butts, no
mhm.
butt on the resume, no butts anywhere. And don't say, I just did this. I'm just a mother. I'm just a wife. I'm just sitting at home. That no place in anything that has to relate, butt out and don't just.
Great,
Those are
great.
two of my favorite
Keep
things.
that in mind because I totally agree. I don't like those words either. And it just opens the door to a whole nother conversation that nobody really wants to have. So just
Right.
as Lucy said, like keep it simple. Just stay right there. It's all good.
Right.
So another dilemma that I'm confronted with a lot of times in my client sessions is that um, some careers they just cannot be pursued somewhere else. For instance, being a lawyer, right?
Right.
So how would you say can someone who, for instance, has been a lawyer in their home country and now they move abroad, how can they convince a potential employer that they can now do a different job, not only skills wise, but also that it's not like a second best thing, but that they actually want this? Because I think sometimes employers can be a little hesitant, like, okay, why are you applying for this? You're actually a lawyer. Like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean?
Right. So that's a great question too. So in the case of a licensed profession, sometimes it's possible, sometimes it's not possible to go through that licensure process in a new country, in your new host country. But you can think about other positions. So like we'll take the lawyer example. Lots of people, for example, in the United States are lawyers or went to law school, but don't practice law and they work in other fields.
Mhm.
um, the key is to think more about less about the job title and more about what you were actually doing. For example, compliance. So legal and compliance, it's a whole thing. So compliance, a lot of the folks who work in compliance are actually lawyers, or they're actually people who went to law school and chose not to practice law for whatever reason, or used to practice law. That's not abnormal at all. A lot of people are teaching. There's also teaching assignments. There are people who have just as much of a nonlinear career as you and go back to law school at night. I mean, there's so many different things that you can do, classes that you can teach, things that you can think about. What skills do I have that I bring to the table? Some of them will be different. Some of them will be very different because things are done differently in different countries. But it doesn't mean that the skills don't carry over to another profession. And again, as far as convincing the employer that you're actually interested in this and it's not just a substitute for your real job, what you really want to do, I would advise the same thing. No buts, no just. This is what I'm offering. These are my skills. I've done this for this company or this entity, and I can do this for you. These are my results. Speak facts, speak a lot of facts about yourself and align them with the job that you're seeking.
Right.
So if you did something that's maybe, for example, you worked a trial lawyer, that's not, it's relevant to compliance maybe, and I'm using this example, but not, you present it in a way that, okay, I know how to compose an oral argument. I know how to write. I know how to interview people. I know how to analyze information. Those are the kinds of things that you would be pointing out. And my ability to do those things got me these results. I can get you those results. I can make sure that the company rather, is 100% compliant, that you guys are not sued for not being, in accordance with regulations. Those are the kinds of skills that people can use and point them out, direct people's eyes and ears, connect the dots for them. Don't leave it to chance where you just put, especially something like I was a solicitor, right? A lot of countries that's the correct terminology for a lot of people. I would make that the target company's language. They don't use the term solicitor. So use some wording that they can understand.
Yeah. So
Use
really,
wording that they can understand.
what it is that the company does, where you're applying to, and then, as you said, connect the dots. Don't leave it up to them to see if
Right.
your profile could fit in this position, but rather explain why, exactly why it does. And again,
Exactly.
be confident about it, think outside the box. And something I like to suggest is to just kind of dissect, like let's continue with the example of the lawyer, right? There is the position lawyer, but there are also a million tasks that and a million skills that a lawyer has. So when you write them all down, just make a really long list, and then you have a list to choose from to, first of all, convince someone to say, this is what I've done, this is what I'm experienced at. And also for yourself, it kind of gives you clues of what kind of jobs that aren't necessarily law related you could apply for. So
Mhm.
just going a level down and just looking at all of the elements that make up the position of the lawyer, or whatever the correct term in your country is, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I think a lot of times people start writing their experience right away, um, just in a very structured way. Uh, get messy first,
Mhm.
brainstorm,
Yeah.
make lists, mind maps, whatever you need to do to think about the work that you've done. And I also encourage people to journal.
Yeah.
This entire time, whether you're at home, whether you're moving to a new home, not, whatever you're doing, write it down. Not everything is going to be used in your resume or CV, but at least if you have those thoughts in your out of your head and onto paper or in an app somewhere, you can definitely, it definitely makes it easier for you to take a look back at what you've been doing and realize how awesome you are and how a company would be fortunate to have that awesomeness on their team. It makes it easier to make the case. Sometimes we just do things because we're so fantastic. We do things and we don't stop to think about what we're doing. We just do it like, oh yeah, I did this, I did that. Don't ask me what I did yesterday. I don't remember because I was just busy doing all this work and not really counting all the time someone said, oh, this really helped me out. Or the fact that you're able to navigate different cultures easily, or maybe not so easily, but still you're able to do it. You're getting it done. It doesn't have to be easy to say that you got it done. Yeah, so those are the kinds of things that people need to really be tracking. I say track your accomplishments. And then when you sit down, like you said, you're not only looking at job titles, you're looking at you, the value that you offer. And you really have a lot of detail on that value because you've been tracking it this whole time. Whatever country you move to, wherever you're working or not working, you have those accomplishments. They're yours.
I love that. And if you need help with this, then maybe, get a loved one to just sit with you and tell you, like, if you don't see it for yourself, what all of those accomplishments are, or, a coach will help you figure that out as well. So if you're having a hard time coming up with them for yourself, then please, get someone else to inspire you on that, because I guarantee you the accomplishments and the skills, they are there. You just have to,
Absolutely.
you just need to like dig them out. So, okay, your specialty is writing just killer CVs and resumes, which in a second you're going to tell us exactly what the difference is. And can you just let us know some important do's and don'ts, some pitfalls that maybe people can avoid when they create their CV or resume?
Oh, absolutely. So the first thing is to think of it as a marketing document, not as just a list of what you've done in the past.
Mhm.
And there is a difference because I can easily just give you my job history like a job application. But when I'm writing this personalized document, I am focusing more on my career stories. A lot of times people think that a story has to be this really long, drawn out thing. It doesn't. Tell me what you did, what challenge you overcame. And I don't mean, that you were solving the world peace issue or something. It doesn't need to be something so newsworthy, but it could just be, I don't know, picking out software for a company or managing to, integrate intercultural communication where you work with people in all these different locations, that's an accomplishment. And then what's the result? That, I don't know, maybe you were able to streamline processes or just whatever you got done. Like, tell me that story. So think of it as a marketing document. In the case where people are having trouble doing that, selling themselves, I would say think of it as how you're adding value, how you're being of service. Some people are very uncomfortable what they feel is bragging. It's not bragging if you're just stating facts about what you've done, but people feel that it is. We most of us, regardless of where we're from, have some sort of modesty norms that we're accustomed to, and so that's why this process gets to be a little uncomfortable. So I would think about how you're adding value.
Yeah, especially women, I think we have that a lot.
Especially women.
And there's
Especially
also
women.
cultural conditioning that in some cultures it's just seen as really untasteful to brag when you're just really listing your real accomplishments. So
Absolutely.
that's a great
Absolutely.
point. Marketing yourself and looking at it as a marketing document. I love that.
And,
Okay.
and I have one more. So lastly, I would think, always think about your audience.
Right.
Whatever you're writing, think about your audience. So if it means that you need to tweak the language so that your target audience understands it, do that. If it means that you need to step away from the document, give it some room to breathe and then come back to it and say, you know what, this is just too wordy, or I don't need this, I don't need that, or I forgot to mention this. Think about what your audience is experiencing as they read your document. And I'm saying document because we haven't gotten into resume versus CV yet. So think about your marketing document and how someone else is going to perceive it. Will they understand the language? It's okay to use a different job title. If you're applying for a government position, I think you need to be very specific with the job title, but you can also add more of, like, some companies will have a corporate title, like vice president. It still doesn't tell me what you did. You could be the vice president of zookeeping, or you could be the vice president of accounting. I have no idea. So you should really explain what you do and use more of a functional title. So thinking of things like that, something that will be understood by the target audience.
And by an international audience or even the local audience of your host country. So maybe there's also, some research that you can do, like you mentioned before. Is it the solicitor? Is it the, whatever terminology they use? Just
Yeah.
make sure that you make that really clear to them. Okay, great. So
Exactly.
yeah, great. So these are some great tips to really craft your CV. You, by the way, would you say that it should be a one page? Some people say it should fit on one page, and others say that it could be longer. Or what do you think?
I'm in the longer camp. I mean, it could be longer. I think for some people, it makes sense to have a one pager. There are companies, like a lot of the tech companies out here, they don't want, or just globally anyway, they don't want anything more than a page. So then this goes into your target audience.
Yeah.
They don't want something, a company like I'm going to say like a Google might only want one pagers. They want everything on that resume to just be in a certain format. You should really look into that before you're applying to those kinds of companies. A lot of people nowadays have 2-page resumes. It used to be, at least here in the States, it was a big no-no. You had to fit everything on a page. But people were also mostly copying their job descriptions, not talking about their accomplishments. I worked on a project that was a $2 million project. Maybe I did some organization for that project, but still it was a huge project. Talk about that and talk about the value that you added. And you can actually do that in a couple of lines, in 1 or 2 lines. And so at the end of the day, even if you've worked for a long time, you can get your resume on 1 page sometimes. Sometimes 2 pages makes more sense because you also want to have white space.
Yeah,
You don't
exactly.
want to have a tiny font that no one can read. It needs to be legible. If it's too hard, people aren't going to read it. Don't make people work so hard. They have a stack of documents to go through. Yours is one of them. A lot of people will spend 6 or 7 seconds reviewing. Again, they do this all day, right? So they know what they're looking for. If they don't see it, next. Move on to the next one. If it's, I can't read it, I'm moving on to the next one. I don't understand what this means, I'm moving on to the next one. People don't generally have time to call you and ask you, what did you mean by that?
Yeah.
Or could you resubmit this? They're not going to take out a magnifying glass, or if it's making them work too hard, they're probably not going to do it. If your career is such that 2 pages make sense for you, if you can honestly go through each thing that you have in your resume and say this is absolutely necessary, then I'd say go for 2 pages. 3 pages, sometimes, but very rarely. 3 pages, very rarely. If you're applying for, say, for example, CEO position, board member, that's a little bit different. And so you might want more detail. They're not looking at tons and tons of candidates for those positions. People are not generally just applying online, uploading their documents to an applicant tracking system for a CEO position. So that's different. Think about your audience. If you're working in a more general position, then absolutely it should be probably 1 to 2 pages. And I'm still not committing to how many, but I would say 1 to 2 pages is a good best practice.
Perfect. So can you tell us real quick, what is the difference between a CV and a resume for those of us who don't know, including myself?
Okay, so here in the States, resume, taken from the Latin, it means brief. It's a summary. It doesn't have to include everything in your entire career history. Some people only decide to go back 10 to 15 years, and that's fine, even if you had more work experience. Some people want to keep that work experience, but they don't go prior work experience, but they don't go into any detail about it. They just want that maybe on their resume. Maybe they worked for a great company that was, well known, and they want to keep that on there. So that's a resume. It's brief. That's why we say 1 to 2 pages. Usually 1 to 2. A CV, at least here in the States, means that you're in maybe more of a technical career, an academic career, a doctor, a professor. People in those professions will list just about everything. The CVs are changing too, though, and they're becoming a little bit more a lot more marketing oriented. It used to be that it was just the facts and nothing but the facts. I taught here. I did this class. I did this seminar, this conference. I published this research. It was only that, but now they're getting to be a lot more more of a marketing piece, and but it's pages and pages. If someone had a 7-page CV, that wouldn't be abnormal at all. A 7-page resume, on the other hand, not normal, not the norm. So it goes back to your target audience, what kind of job you're applying to. In some places, the term CV and resume are used interchangeably.
Right. Okay.
They are. So, so you need to know what your target audience is expecting you to have. If you're applying to an office manager position and you show up with a 7-page resume or CV, people are probably not going to read it.
Yeah. Okay.
If you're looking for a professor,
1 to 2 pages. I kind of like that as a good practice.
1 to 2. 1 to 2 is good. But if you're a professor and you have 7 pages, that's great. Yeah. If you had 10 pages, that's fine too, because people are actually looking at every single thing you've done. Every class you taught summer school 2 years ago, it's on there. It's on there. You presented at a conference, it's going to be on there. Those are all things that would be on a CV.
Okay, perfect. And then can you tell us the cover letter? How important is it? Do people really read it? Should you adapt it, for each position that you're applying for? What can you tell us about that?
I say absolutely write a cover letter. Absolutely write one. Lots of people don't read them. I heard one time about 80% of recruiters don't read them, but I say write them anyway. I know, it's crazy. And part of it is because they're just busy. So I say write them anyway, because a lot of times, even if the recruiter doesn't read it, the hiring manager reads it. And if you don't have it, that can be something that sets you apart from the next candidate, right? If you have it and they don't read it, you lost maybe 15 minutes or so, but you haven't lost much. But having it, I think, is better than not having it. I do like templates. I love to help people write their own templates and say, this is my voice. This works best for the industry that I'm in. So in doing that, I do say still tweak the template. It shouldn't sound like a template. The template is just to make your life easier, to make sure you're hitting all the points, but it shouldn't be identical for each company, because you're going to use that to maybe highlight some of the things that you've written in your resume or CV. It's also a place that you can explain a little bit more about yourself. Just you can go into more detail, not too much detail, but a little bit more detail especially if you're someone who's been stationed in different places. So that might be a good time to do that. Present yourself in that way. Explain a little bit of, maybe the hopping around. Not too much. Uh, Also, I wouldn't want to repeat everything that's on the resume, but if you can pull out a few lines of note, I like, what, one of my favorite things to do in a cover letter is to align your experience or your mission with the company's requirements. Go through, find like the top five. If they're saying that they want someone who can multitask, think
Yeah.
of a great example where you've done that, especially if there are numbers. If there's any way that you can quantify, do it. I did this annually. I did this monthly. This project was a $2 million project. Any place that you can do that and show the result very briefly, maybe like some bullet points, I would do that. You could also align yourself with the company's core values and show how you've done things in your background that align with those core values. So you would introduce.
It in now that you just you do some research about this company, you look
Mhm,
for their core values, you look what they write in the position description, what they're
mhm,
looking for, and
absolutely.
then something in your cover letter like um the ways my relocations, my international lifestyle have helped me develop these skills exactly, and then
Mhm,
you briefly list something or you just make it relevant exactly to the situation, so
right.
that it's not a but, it's not a like
Adjust.
a just wow, look at what she's bringing to the table, um and
And you're
and
speaking their language.
they're looking for, yeah.
And you're speaking their language. If you're writing to a tech company, that language is going to be very different than if you're writing to, say, a law firm.
Mhm.
Very different court culture. And even within industries, there are different corporate cultures. So you want to make sure that you know sort of who you're talking to. You
Yeah.
want to make sure that you know that. If you can address that to the person who would be hiring you, even better. And one of the things that people complain about a lot, especially when they're from a different country, is I don't have a network here. I
Yeah.
don't know anyone here. People say it's all about who you know, but what do I do if I don't know anyone? What do I do if I have this wonderful CV or wonderful resume? Your work is not done yet. You still have to get it in the right person's hands.
Especially in some countries more than in others. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. So you can write it, but if no one's reading it, it doesn't matter that much. So that's why I say people need to see you
Yeah.
and before they can hire you. If you're great, but I don't know you exist, then how can I possibly hire you? So definitely using other avenues to make sure that that CV even gets into the right hands. So
Right.
writing a cover letter to that hiring manager, writing, keeping in touch with people on LinkedIn, that sort of thing, and expand using LinkedIn to expand. So I know it's about resumes and CVs, but like I said, none of that really matters much if no one's reading it. So
I actually have a different episode, a previous one, if you guys remember, about building your network abroad. So this is also something that in parallel you can really start doing and implementing, because in some cultures it is true that connections are a little more powerful than in others. So it might help you, and otherwise, as Lucy said, just address it to a specific person, and keep in touch on LinkedIn, and it'll require some time, but I think it's definitely worth the effort, because you are working on your career, and that is yours to keep no matter where you're going, right? And
absolutely.
it's just getting richer and longer and better. So that's something that's just for you. So put in the effort, put in the work. I think it's worth it. And if you need some more help with this, I know that Lucy, you offer a revision on a revision service for CVs, resumes on your website. What other services are you offering to people that want to take this a little further and get some professional help?
I'm a big proponent of people teaching people how to fish for themselves. So I do write resumes. I don't write them that often just because I like to teach people how to write. So you give them a structure. I'm coming out with a new workbook where it's sort of like a DIY kit. It's an extension of my resume review service. So I will give you some tools to help you think through your career, some verbs you can use lots and lots of action verbs and that sort of thing, a template even, and then go from there, do your own writing, and then I'll review it for you. So that way you feel like, okay, I think I had second eyes on this. I'm more confident about doing that. So that's called Look Good on Paper. And you can find that on my website, lucysamuels.co. And I also do language coaching. I teach business English. So helping people who are trying to figure out how to find their voice in whether it's English is not your first language or whether you just feel like I am not confident in how I present myself. I work with people with that also.
Yeah, picking the right words. That's also so important, especially if you have such a limited space to put all your experience on, 1 or 2 pages, or you have 15 minutes in an interview and just being able to choose the right words. I think that's really important too.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's great. And I'm going to link all of these services and web links. I'm going to link all of that in the session notes. And then finally, please tell us, where can people find out more about you, follow you, your social media handles, and where are you hanging out? Where can people follow you?
I make it very easy for people. It's lucysamuels.co is my website. My Instagram is lucysamuels.co also. And I'm on LinkedIn as Lucy Samuels 1 is my personal profile on LinkedIn, Lucy Samuels 1. So I have a company page on there. I don't remember. I think it's just Lucy Samuels. So I make it very, very easy for people to find me. So it's Lucy Samuels, not the co. And yes, if you heard about me on the Expat Wife, please let me know. So that way I can shout out Camilla here. I look forward to meeting new people. That's one of my favorite things to do, is talk to folks from all around the world and help them out with their careers.
Perfect. So now you know where to locate Lucy. She's available to help you, get that really going, get your career started or restarted or whatever. And right. So with that, I thank you so much, Lucy, for being here with us, for sharing all of your wisdom. I'm sure it's going to be of such great help for so many people. Thanks so much. And yes, and I will speak to you guys again next week with a brand new episode.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.